So Fantastic Four, First Steps, is the Marvel Cinematic Universe's first attempt to do a Fantastic Four film. And look, the Fantastic Four movies, they haven't had the best track record. They had the Roger Corman film that got shelved. They had the Fox era Fantastic Four that was pretty underwhelming, when you go back and watch those two films they did. And then of course there was the the fan four stick, whatever you want to call it, the one with Miles Teller, which ended up just being a big mess. Like, it was trying to be body horror and didn't quite deliver on that. It was a mess. And First Steps, it'd be so easy to just, compliment this film as just being, yes, it's the first competent Fantastic Four film that doesn't feel like a mess. I mean, that alone would probably garner enough praise, but I was actually very impressed with how this version of the Fantastic Four wasn't afraid to embrace kind of like the 1960s from which it was born. So, embracing kind of more of the Jack Kirby elements, also the a lot of the Retro-Futurism with with the additions of stuff like the Fantastic Car and Herbie the Robot. But I think just the biggest thing about this, I think that makes this film work is that it focuses on the Fantastic Four more as a family. Like, you care about these characters immediately instead of just, getting the standard introduction. It's very much, like James Gunn's Superman from earlier this year, which is that, a lot of people are probably familiar with these superheroes. So why not just, get their origins out of the way in the most in the best way possible of, like, building the world up as you're telling us about it. And they do here. So we get to, like, if you're not familiar with the Fantastic Four, you get introduced to all of them here. You have, Reed Richards, played by Pedro Pascal. Of course, he has the ability to, as Mr. Fantastic, to stretch his limbs to any length. And that does play into his character of, wanting to do everything and learn everything and be everywhere all at once and kind of learning that he can't. And of course, he's married to Sue Storm, who is played by Vanessa Kirby, who has the ability to turn invisible and generate force fields. And basically, like, she pushes herself a lot in this film to kind of, like, maintain this family a little bit. She's not on her own to bring everyone together here because everyone generally loves each other. Especially, like, you would think there'd be a lot more friction with, Johnny Storm, who plays like the Human Torch. He can set himself on fire. He's played by Joseph Quinn. You think he'd be, a little bit more egotistical and brash and, go against the grain. But no, he really digs being in this family, especially when he plays off of Reed's friend, of Ben Grimm, played in the film by Eben Moss Backrack. And there's like a natural ease between Ben and Johnny, where it's just like they just kind of feel like fun little brothers, who just like they bicker a little bit, but they generally love each other. And I love that the film starts off this superhero ensemble, just like they're a great family unit. Like they've had these powers for quite a long time, and they've gotten used to them. They've gotten used to not only using it for the benefit of like New York that they're trying to protect, but also using it to better bond as a family. Because I mean, the one thing that struck me immediately was just like the warmth between the characters, but also the smarts between them. Like, it never really feels like these characters are, like they talk down to each other, or, they reduce them too much. Like, it felt like, Ben Grimm could just be, like the big, just like the tank who doesn't really think that much. But no, he's got a great personality. He loves to cook. I love that they ground him a lot more by having him, be like a staple of the neighborhood, the way that he connects with people, the way that he establishes a romance with Natasha Lyonne's character of Rachel. So they do a lot of great world building in this film, especially that they ground them enough so that, they've gotten used to not only handling supervillains on the regular, but also kind of working out a deal with them to kind of like, make the world a better place. So it feels like, everything is perfect for them. And here's what I love so much about using like kind of like the 1960s Retro-Futurism setting for this, is that it plays into that era of, having a lot of hope for the future, but also, being so certain of everything that you feel like you have this safety net that can never be cut. And then, of course, you got to have some conflict then, of course. So, then the Fantastic Four have to face off against the biggest villain that they could ever fight, which is Galactus, a giant planet-eating monster, played in the film played in the film by Ralph Ineson, and they don't know what to do. So they've gone from just understanding everything about this world, knowing how to tackle supervillains, knowing how to make great technological advancements, trying to figure out what else exists in space, and here they are faced with this problem of not knowing what to do and having their unity and their bond threatened by that. So it very much felt like like the '60s style, like they weren't just using it as a style. Like there are some great looking sets here and there, and not to mention the music by Michael Giacchino. And at first, like I didn't go into this film looking up the composer, and when I first heard like the music start up for when they were introducing the Fantastic Four, I kind of thought to myself, oh, is this a Giacchino score, or am I just having more flashbacks of like The Incredibles and Speed Racer with like the similar orchestra here? But no, it was Giacchino, which I'm sure is probably going to garner some easy comparisons for to The Incredibles. But The Incredibles, the inspiration for that was cyclical anyway, so that's just the way it goes. But yeah, I was struck by just like how much love there was for these characters, that you cared about them when of course they get to the big giant fight here when they end up going against Galactus, and to a little bit of a degree the Silver Surfer played by Julia Garner, but also just there is a warmth to them where it feels like they're trying to like this family is not just trying to like save the day and save Earth, but also try to find a way to keep everybody on the same page, because like they're not just tasked with saving their planet, but just bringing everyone on Earth together, which is a monumental task. But the fact that these superheroes have been working on it for so long, and the fact that they're able to get along with each other, just really made me love the film, and especially just loving these characters just hanging out with each other. Like anything as simple as just like making dinner, or just like running errands, just little things like that was just so much fun. And I think this is probably the biggest flaw of the film as well, which is that like the film is like it's brisk, like it's just under 2 hours, and it goes so quickly in establishing its world and all the different little details, and the '60s billboards and the television programs and the magazines and the publications. All these great little details are in there, but it goes by so quick that the biggest flaw of this film, and maybe this is kind of like a good flaw you'd want to have, but I never felt like I got enough of this version of Earth with this version of the Fantastic Four, that I just wanted to hang out with them. And I think like the biggest casualty, I think, of this type of film is that we don't really get as much with Ben Grimm, because it felt like everything was there was like such a rush for like the maintaining of the family unit and the saving of Earth, that we didn't get a lot of time to explore the other characters here. Like Johnny Storm is a whole bit where he's trying to figure out the language of the Silver Surfer. I thought that was really cool. That kind of gave him something to do and kind of like prove himself. Not just that he's egotistical and horny. He's a little bit horny for Silver Surfer, but that he still has some intelligence to him. And also like Ben Grimm, like we get. I think that this is probably my biggest qualm with the film. It's just like we get so little of him, and there's like such a natural ease to Ben that I wanted to see more of him. Like I wanted to see. We have a great setup for that. Like I love the scene where he's just outside of school. He impresses the kids by picking up a car. Makes like little jokes here, like he's not trying too hard for a laugh. And then the way he kind of flirts with Rachel and talks about how he loved growing up in this neighborhood. It's like that's an adorable scene. And I wanted more of that. I wanted like to have that scene where like they go on a date, or where she kind of like questions like like the formation of his rocks, just little things like that, just to like build up these characters more. Because like for every like time we did get like moments like that where it's just like characters interacting with each other and having a natural ease to like the comedy that was going on, we'd get right back to how do we solve the Galactus problem? Like how do we protect Earth? Do we move it? What do we do? Do we conserve power? It kept shifting back to that. For taking place on was it like Earth 828 here? It felt like this is like a much different film, and not just because it takes place on a different Earth. It felt like there was a different tone here. It's brightly colored. It embraces the absurdity of the Fantastic Four. Like it has like the classic suits. It has Herbie the robot thrown in there with this kind of like 2XL looking face. They even throw in like villains you think would be too goofy to have, like like the Mole Men and stuff like that, and bringing up other villains like the Wizard. Before we get to like the bigger threat of Galactus, and it has like a natural flow to it. It doesn't feel like it's just like, oh, here's like this fun, colorful version of the Fantastic Four, and then here comes Silver Surfer and Galactus to make it grim and dark and ruin everything, and that it threatens, this wondrous vision of the future. No, it actually has a good progression. It does play into the themes of sticking together with family and with unity, and just, making the characters lovable. I had more fun watching these characters try to install a baby seat in a car than I did watching them, punch out, Galactus or set him on fire, because they can do that. They have these cool powers, and they do put them like to good use. And I love the fact that the powers here are very restrained, like, because that was kind of like one of my big issues with like the past Fantastic Four films, is that it didn't really feel like it felt like they were just finding busy work for these characters to do something. Like, like Johnny Storm has this power of like flame, to like soar through the air, to like suck up fire and all that. And like, what is he gonna do with that? Like, is he gonna like just light cigars with like his thumb? Is that it? There's got to be more he can do with that, especially with with all the visual effects we have nowadays. There should be like a better use of it, but also a restraint on it, so that you care enough about these characters, so that by the time, yes, when we do get to the big climax where they fight Galactus, yes, they are going to use their powers. They're going to use everything to their ability. But up to that point, you like them, and I didn't really feel like I was losing something by not having them constantly punching somebody or fighting somebody. Like, just having them figure out problems and interact with each other and form relationships better. Like, that's the good stuff. That's the family unit. That's what makes Fantastic Four, so exciting, and what made this version, head over heels above the other films. Like, and there's a lot of stuff that makes First Steps work better than the other Fantastic Four films. Obviously, if you want to go on like the bare bones, you can compare like the visual effects. Yes, they're better. The writing here is better. Villains like Galactus and the Mole Men are much better used in this film. But just ultimately, the core of it is just making these characters likable and lovable and intelligent. Like they have like really smart ideas in this film, and they're constantly challenged, which again really does well for like the 60s. Like it started reminding me a lot of stuff like Pleasantville, where at the end of Pleasantville, all these characters who thought they had everything in life figured out, they get to the very end and everything has changed, and they're just like, where do we go from here? And they're like, I don't know. And it's like, it's such a like freeing moment. And it's very much the same here with like Fantastic Four. It's like, yes, there is stuff they don't know about. Like there's, and of course, if you've seen the end of Thunderbolts, there's something bigger implied with that as well. There's, entire universes they don't know about. They still don't even know how Galactus works all that well. But it's exciting, because then you don't know what the future is going to hold. There's going to be good stuff and there's going to be bad stuff, but just embracing it all together is what makes the Fantastic Four so much fun. So yeah, it's bright, it's colorful, it's cheerful, but just the way that it establishes the characters and gives them enough to do and makes them grounded enough so that you care about them more in terms of their personality rather than their superpowers. That's what made First Step so much fun. So yeah, I was very much surprised with how much I fell in love with Fantastic Four First Steps.